Welcome to the Self-Reliant Living Show, where we talk all about a self-reliant lifestyle to save money, live greener, eat healthier, and be prepared for anything so you can take care of the ones you love in good times and bad. I'm your host, Jennifer Osech, a homeschooling mom of 3 boys. I'm the author of the Preparedness Planner series, and my husband and I are the lead teachers of Self-Reliant School, a website dedicated to giving you the skills and confidence to take care of yourself and your community. Be sure to stop by and pick up your free videos from inside Self-Reliant School that will get you started growing, cooking, and preserving your own food today. You can pick these up at selfreliantschool.com/free. Now, on with the show. Welcome to the Self-Reliant Living Show. Today we are going to talk all about dehydrating. I'm going to answer your questions. I don't know if you were able to watch the previous show that we had on the subject. That was episode number 13. You could go to selfreliantlife.tv/013 if you would like to watch that show. But we took a bunch of dehydrating questions, and there were so many that I couldn't even get to all of them. So I really wanted to do another show on answering your dehydrating questions, and I have some special things to talk to you about here in a little bit. The first one I wanted to mention really quick is that we are giving away a Excalibur dehydrator. We're also giving away a canner and a coffee grinder because I know that you like to make powders sometimes with a grinder, and that's a really handy tool to have. Anyway, we are having a giveaway with all of those things, and I'm going to share that link with you a little bit later in the show, so be sure and stay tuned for that. Okay, so Shannon is saying we like to dehydrate food for camping. Yes, that is a great application of using dehydrated food. Okay, so we are just going to jump in with the questions, and if you have questions, if you are you're watching here live, please go ahead, and I'm monitoring the questions. I'm monitoring actually the live show. So when you see me look down, that's what I'm looking at. And so I'm just trying to make sure that I am not missing everyone. I try to say hi to as many people as I can. I love talking to you guys. I love interacting with you. This is a highlight of my week, every week, being able just to talk to you. And I just feel like we're forming such a community, and it's just, like I said, it makes me happy. So please go ahead if you have a question that comes up. Maybe you're not thinking about it right now, but as we talk about dehydrating, it might come up. Please just go ahead and put those in the comments, and I will do my best to answer. Even if you're watching on the replay, I will do my best to answer throughout the day and the coming days when you ask your questions in the comments. Okay, so our first question comes from Laurel, and she asked, how do you rehydrate raspberries? Okay, well, there's a couple of ways that you can rehydrate them. My favorite way is just to put them in some water and let them set for a little while. However, if you had a recipe that called for raspberries, what you could do is you could add the dehydrated raspberries and then add just a little bit more water, and they should rehydrate in your recipe. And the type of recipe I'm talking about here is like a baked good. If you're going to have a recipe like for some cookies or some bread or something like that, if you add just a little bit more liquid, it doesn't really even have to be in water format. You can add a little bit more milk or whatever liquid that you're using, and they should rehydrate just fine. If you're going to use them in a sauce or something like that, like a dessert sauce, I would rehydrate them first with some water and then put them in your sauce. Hi, Rebecca. Okay, so Rebecca has been dehydrating for over 30 years, and that's another thing. I would really love it if you guys would share with each other, because I know some of the questions will come up and I won't be able to get to them right away, and I know some people will already have the answers to those, and I would love it if you would share your knowledge. And I learned that way too, because I'd love to say, yeah, I know everything, but that is just not the case. I learn every day, and I just love that we have this community where we can share our experiences and what we know. Okay, so the second question comes from Betty, and she asked about freezing onions. And the thing is, really what she's talking about here is an extra safety precaution that I recommend with dehydrated food. And I have to be honest with you, I don't always do this, but I do sometimes. And here's what it is. When you are finished dehydrating your food, I recommend most of the time, like I said, that you put it in the freezer for a couple of weeks, because what that will do is that will kill any insect bugs or well, of course they're bugs, but any insect eggs, I should say. And that will, it actually helps a little bit with the drying process, especially if you live in a humid area. Now, I don't have any scientific evidence for that. I have just seen that happen with my own food. So what I do is I will put the dehydrated food in a mason jar. Usually you can put it in a Ziploc bag if you're fine with using plastic, and then you put it in the freezer. I have a deep freeze and I put it in there, and I will leave it in there for a week to 3 weeks ish. Sometimes I will keep dehydrated food in the freezer if I feel like that it needs to be refrigerated, if it's something like meat or eggs or dairy or something like that. But I'm talking here really about vegetables. I will go ahead and put them in the freezer, and then, like I said, that will neutralize anything that came from an insect, even the insect themselves. And I know that it's like, well, oh, that's gross. Well, some people, including myself, will dehydrate things outside, especially things like onions, because there's a very strong odor. Of course, it depends on the onions and all of that stuff, and it depends on you. Some people love that smell, and some people, it just, they can't stand it, and it makes your eyes water and all of that. So I recommend putting your dehydrator like on a porch, or just, putting it outside, and then at least starting the dehydrating process on the porch or outside. And then if you need to, you can bring it back in, because after the onions or strong odored food starts to dry, that odor will diminish somewhat, and you can finish the drying process inside. And some people just leave it outside altogether, and that's fine too. But during that time, insects might get in there. The blower and the heat will help keep them out, but you never know. It just depends on what kind of insect it is and where you live. If you live out in the country and everything decides to visit your porch, you never know what could be in there. Then also, freezing will neutralize some bacteria, not all. And so this is, I have called it before, like a form of pasteurization. It's not really a true pasteurization. So, it's not the same, I guess, the meaning of the word. I'm just calling it that because it does prevent bacteria from growing. And then also, like I said, it neutralizes any kind of things that got in there. Anyway, so what I'm saying is to do this, and it will help, like I said, a little bit with finishing up drying, especially if you live in a humid environment, and then take it out a couple weeks later. And then she's also asking about, she asked, how do you get the moisture out of the jars? Okay, well, there really shouldn't be any moisture when they go in the freezer. So sometimes if you live in a warm environment, when you take them out of the freezer, then there will be condensation, but that should only be on the outside. Now, if it's a plastic bag and it's not airtight, you could have some problems with that. I usually do mine in a mason jar, and I usually vacuum seal it before I put it inside of the freezer. And so when I take it out, I might have condensation on the outside of the jar, but I don't have any problems on the inside of the jar. So that is kind of what I talk about that in some of my posts. So if you've read any of those things or read any of the posts, then you know what I'm talking about here. It's not mandatory that you do this. It's just something that I find helps. So if you have had problems with taking your dehydrated food out and then a couple of days later it gets moldy or something like that, or you've had things that you don't know what they are growing in your food, then you might try this technique and see if it works for you. Okay, so yes, I'm getting people do that as well. Okay, and then I'm getting a question, would you put the food in the freezer if you vacuum pack them? I would if you've had problems with the food not being completely dry, because like I said, that freezing it just helps take that little bit of moisture out. I would vacuum seal it first, and like I said, you would keep all of the moisture out. It's just the temperature would drop at that point if you put it in the freezer. And like I said, it just helps keep it dry, and it just makes it where when you take it out, it just seems to last longer, and it seems to take care of some of those problems when you do have high humidity. So if you have had problems, I would definitely recommend trying that technique and see if it works for you. And I would love to hear back from you to see if, to hear your input and see if it does work for you. Okay, so we're going to move on to a next question, which is from Tina. And she says, or she asks, have you dehydrated summer squash at all? And yes, I have. I have dehydrated yellow summer squash and zucchini with great success. And then the thing you want to know before you dehydrate summer squash is how you're going to use it, or you want to try and have that in mind, because if you are going to use it in like soups or stews or casseroles, you're going to want to cook it a little bit first. And then if you are making something like zucchini chips or something like that, then you might just want to blanch it, and then you could season the chips. And then you can also prepare those raw as well. And so they turn out kind of crispy, put a little bit of oil on those chips, and then you can eat them just like you would potato chips. So the trick with that is to know what you're going to use the squash for in the long run. And then that will tell you how you should prepare it to go into the dehydrator. Okay, so the next question comes from Sandy. She says some beans can be sprouted like lentils and garbanzo beans, even though they are usually eaten fresh and raw. I wonder if, having had some of their starches turn into sugars and plant tissue, they would dehydrate and rehydrate well without requiring cooking. No, I think that you really need to cook your lentils and garbanzo beans. There are some beans that have some toxins in them if you eat them raw. You need to cook your beans. And so you can sprout them though. That will make them easier to digest. However, you always need to cook your beans. I'm never going to say that it's okay to eat them raw. I know there are some people, especially if they follow a raw food diet, that they may try that. And, I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying my recommendation would always be to cook your beans for easier digestion, and then also to eliminate some of those toxins that are in the beans. So just want to go on the record for saying that. But you can definitely sprout them first, then dehydrate them, and then cook them, and they're going to be a whole lot more nutritious for you. So I would recommend trying that. It's an extra step, I know, but they are so much more digestible if you do sprout them first. And so I would definitely recommend doing that. I'm just looking here to see your questions, so keep them coming. I love answering them. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next one. This comes from Deanna, and she asked, there is quite a bit of difference between 48 hours and 72 hours. So how would you know that your food is done without them being turned into rocks? Okay, you're right. There is a huge difference between 48 hours and 72 hours. And here is the thing that comes into play when we're talking about putting your dehydrated food into the dehydrator for whatever time. And that is the food itself, what variety it is, I should say. There's going to be a difference between raw cherries and then cooked squash, right? So there's going to be a shorter dehydrating time with your cooked squash than there is your cherries, just because of the food, just the characteristics of the food. Okay, so the next thing is going to be the water content of your food. If you have a squash, say, for example, and you have it from maybe 2 different locations in your garden, maybe 2 different locations in the country, just depending on what type of squash it is. But all things being equal, those 2 kinds of squash could actually have a different water content. So they're going to take different times dehydrating. before the dehydrating time is, or before they are completely dehydrated. So the water content of the food, the type of food it is, then also the humidity where you live is a huge factor in determining drying times. Because somebody in Florida, somebody near the coast, is going to have a longer drying time than somebody, say, that lives in Nevada or someplace that's really dry. So you have to take all of these things into consideration. And so when you're looking at a technique or a recipe like you would see on our blog, and the drying times are so vast, that is the reason for that, is because you just don't know, I just don't know when I'm writing this, your circumstances. And so they could take anywhere from 48 to 72 hours, maybe in some cases longer. So the best way to figure this out is to keep a journal and to write down how long certain foods take. And so, because I think that one of the biggest variables here is humidity in your area. These other things are variables too. So even if you do take notes, they're not going to ever be exactly the same. That's why I don't see these charts and things like that of, okay, cherries will take exactly this amount of time in this area, because it depends on your cherries, right? Now, I have written a book and it goes into detail about this, and I have attempted to give you some charts, and I take into account all these variables, and I will put the link in the show notes if you're interested in looking and learning more about that book. But even though I did lay this all out, I'm still not able to give you the exact time every time. So that, you just have to know that going in. Dehydrating is not an exact time ever on almost anything, because it also can depend on the time of year in your area. So not only is it the humidity and where you live geographically, it's the time of year as well. So the best thing that you could do is, like I said, take notes, and then if you feel like you do need some more explanation on that, I would be happy to put that link in the show notes so you can learn more about what I've done in our Dehydrating Charts book. Okay, so Marcy asks, is there a trick for dehydrating berries? Trick. Maybe. Depends on what kind of berries that you're talking about. Something like strawberries, not really. You just go ahead and slice them up and then put them in your dehydrator, and that's pretty much it. Now, if you're talking about something like blueberries or blackberries, then yeah, there is a trick. And the thing is that it just kind of depends on the berry. And here is the trick I'm talking about. I'm talking about actually checking the fruit. And what that means is making a little bit of a hole, or poking a hole, I should say, in, say we're talking about blueberries, poking a hole in the blueberry. And so what that will do is that will break the surface tension of the skin that is around the fruit, and then that will allow the inside to dry out. And so blueberries is one of those, maybe not, for berries. Sometimes I check them, sometimes I don't. One of the things I would definitely check would be cranberries, and then also blackberries. I find that blackberries need to be checked. If they're not, they take forever to dry, and they may not ever dry before they start going moldy. So that's the trick I think that maybe you're talking about, is checking the berries, and that is to poke a hole in them. And there's certain foods that you need to check before they will dry out completely. Like I said, what that means is poking a hole in the skin or through the skin, and that allows some of the juices to dry out, and then it breaks the surface tension of the skin. Okay, so I'm just looking here just to look at your questions. I love answering your questions, so please keep them coming. Okay, so now I have a question from Simone, and she's talking about dehydrating pumpkins, and she wants to put them in a couscous or stew, and she wants to know, is it necessary to soak the dried pumpkin in water before? Or just place the dried chunks in a pot while cooking the meal? And is the cooking time similar to fresh pumpkin? Do you spice the pumpkin before dehydrating with salt or pepper? Even the idea of pumpkin flour is great for bread. Yes, there's a post on our blog about pumpkin flour. So if you've never heard of that, that would be a great thing for you maybe to go and search. And I will try and put a link to that post in the show notes. Okay, so let's take this one step at a time. She's asking to soak the dried pumpkin in water before putting it in a pot. Well, if it's going to be for couscous, I would go ahead and rehydrate it before I put it in there. If it's going to be for a stew, I wouldn't. I would just dump it right into the stew. Now, the question here is if you cooked it before you dehydrated it, because if you cooked it before you dehydrated it, then it's going to take less time to rehydrate. If you didn't cook it before, then it's going to take more time to rehydrate. So depending on your stew and how long you're going to have it cooking, then you would want to, you may want to do it before if you didn't cook the pumpkin. But most of the stews that I make, I let cook for a while, simmer and all that to blend all of the flavors. So really, if it were me, I would just dump them in there. Okay, so, or place the dry chunks. Okay, and then is the cooking time similar to fresh pumpkin? No, you're gonna, like I said, you're gonna have to take a little bit more time, especially if you didn't cook it beforehand. If you did cook it beforehand, it should be pretty quick. It should be maybe even faster than fresh pumpkin. And then this is a great question that she brings up. Do you season your food before dehydrating? And in general, I do not recommend that you season it at all. The salt can actually interfere with the dehydrating process, so I do not do that. There are a few exceptions to that rule, but in general, I do not season it with anything unless you are going to eat it right out of the dehydrator, like I mentioned earlier, like zucchini chips or something like that. You would put a little bit of oil and then the seasoning on them, and then you would eat them right out of the dehydrator. So that is going to be the end of that process. And if it's not, if you're going to use it in some other food or recipe, then I would not season the food at all. Okay, so I am looking. I'm looking at more questions. Okay, and we're getting off topic here. Misty says you can't can pumpkin anymore. Okay, I just want to, because we do have a lot of canning posts and all of that on our blog as well. Let me just take this really quick. You can pumpkin, only you cannot can pureed pumpkin. You have to can pumpkin in chunks. And if you want to know more about that, you can go to selfreliantlife.tv/002, and that is a Canning 101 episode. So be sure and check that out if you have canning questions. Okay, so I'm going to go on to answer a question from Carla, and she says, is it possible to use the oven as opposed to a dehydrator? If so, what would be the estimated drying time? Okay, it is possible to use an oven in some cases. And the thing is that your oven needs to go down below or be able to be set below 200 degrees. Now, I have heard that some of the newer models have a dehydrating setting, and that's very interesting. My oven does not, but that is a very interesting concept to me, and that could work for some things. However, you're really going to need to be able to monitor the temperature to do a large variety of food, because different foods need to be dehydrated at different temperatures. So if you have an oven that does go below that 200 degree mark, then what you might want to do is see if it keeps the temperature at that low. Sometimes there'll be a display and it'll tell you the temperature, so investigate that. And then if it doesn't, if it just, if you can only just put it on warm or something like that, you might want to put a thermometer inside your oven so you can monitor the temperature. And I do know that there are some people who will recommend that you take food, you put it in the oven, and then you prop the door open so that you reduce the temperature inside the oven. I don't recommend doing that. I feel like that is a safety hazard, and so I would not do that if I were you. I would, maybe try to invest in a dehydrator. You can get lower end ones that are very reasonably priced, and even ones that are secondhand that are pretty reasonably priced. And then I would go from there in terms of dehydrating. So I would not prop the door open. But if, like I said, your oven can be set below 200 degrees, or you have a dehydrating setting on your oven, then I would definitely investigate those, because you could dehydrate that way for some things. And then, of course, the drying time is just going to depend on the food and your environment. Okay. Oh, okay. So there's a question about the pumpkin. Can you dehydrate pureed pumpkin? Yes, you can. You can dehydrate it. You would just go ahead and spread it out on your dehydrator sheets, and then you could put it in your dehydrator, and you could use it in soup, stews. You could powder it. That would be a great powder. You might want to even add a little bit of spice after you've dehydrated it, and then make a powder out of it. That would be a fun thing, maybe to put in bread or even baked goods. You could experiment with that. I would love to hear, if you do decide to do that, I would love to hear about what you come up with in terms of baked goods, because that sounds like a wonderful idea. I might have to try that out myself. Okay. Let's see, let's go on. We're getting to the end here. I always want to get through all of these questions. Last time I only got through, 3 or 4 that I had my notes for, and then everybody kept asking questions, and it was great. Obviously, I'm still not finished. I'll probably have to do another dehydrating questions episode, but that is just okay with me. I love talking about this. This is a subject near and dear to my heart. I absolutely love dehydrating. And so let's go on and take one more question here. This is from Patricia, and she says, when do you put them in the freezer? Before or after you dehydrate them? Okay, so if we're talking about what we were talking about just a minute ago about the freezer pasteurization thing, then you would put them in after you dehydrate them for those safety reasons that I mentioned, to kill some bacteria. Like I said, I won't do all of the different kinds of bacteria, so it's not foolproof. And then also to kill any insect eggs or whatever is in your food. I know that's a kind of a gross subject, but that you recommend doing that if you buy things like wheat berries and things like that in bulk as well, because it's the food commercial food service, they do the best they can, but it's not perfect, right? So we want to just take that extra step. So you would do that after you dehydrate. Now you can go ahead and you can take things out of the freezer and dehydrate them. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but you can definitely do that if you have things in your freezer that have been in there a while and you're worried about them getting frostbite or something like that. You can definitely take those out and you can dehydrate them, and you can use them at a later date. Now, I would caution you though that freezing is a process and dehydrating is a process, and canning, of course, is a process. So if you have taken something, and let's just say, for example, canned corn, if you've taken it out of the can and you've put it in the freezer, and then you take it out of the freezer and then you put it to the dehydrator, along the line there, it's going to lose some taste, it's going to lose some texture, and it's going to lose some of its nutrition, it's going to lose some of its goodness. So just be aware of that. But you can definitely take things out of the freezer, mixed vegetables, maybe you find them on sale, whatever, you can go ahead and dehydrate them, and then they won't take up as much room in your freezer. Just understand though that, like I said, freezing is a process and so is dehydrating. So the more you put, the more processes you put things through, the more you're going to make all of the components of the food, like I said, the taste, the nutrition, all of that diminish just a bit. But like I said, those vegetables would be fine to use in a casserole or a soup or stew or something like that. So I definitely wouldn't waste them, and it's definitely something I would, do in terms of my food stores, but just keep that in mind as you go along, because you might all of a sudden take a bite and go, something's different about this. Well, yeah, it's been through a lot of processes, so there's that. I recommend for the maximum taste to always dehydrate fresh vegetables and fruit. So you may have to blanch them or cook them first, but if they start out in a fresh state at optimum ripeness, then you should not lose a lot of taste or nutrition through the dehydrating process. So, okay, so really quickly, I want to move on here, and I want to tell you how to get or enter, I should say, our giveaway, because like I said, we are giving away an Excalibur dehydrator. And if you go to selfreliantschool.com/giveaway, there's all the directions for how to enter that giveaway. It is super simple. We are celebrating being on iTunes, and all you need to do is go, there's like 3 or 4 steps, and that's it. And then you will be entered to win an Excalibur dehydrator is the first prize, or second is going to be a Presto canner, and then the third prize is a coffee grinder, coffee maker grinder / grinder, so it does both. So I am super excited to announce that giveaway and to encourage you to enter. That giveaway is going to end on this Wednesday. I forget the date at this very moment, but go. The what? The 12th. Bill's over here telling me it's the 12th. Okay, so it ends on October the 12th, 2016. So be sure and enter before then. Then I want to announce something really special, and that is I have put together a free cheat sheet, and it is on how to store your dehydrated goods. And it is completely free. You can go to selfreliantschool.com/dry storage to get that cheat sheet. And like I said, it is completely free. It is my gift to you, and I am so excited to be offering that. I'm just, like I said, I'm thrilled about this community, and I would love for you to have that cheat sheet. I understand through asking questions and taking surveys that is one of the biggest concerns people have, is how on earth do I store all this wonderful food that I'm dehydrating? So I have written out this cheat sheet, and hopefully it will help you figure out the best way to store your dehydrated food. Okay, so like I said, we have an entire section on our blog that's dedicated to dehydrating, and we would love for you to visit. That is at selfreliantschool.com, and you can just click on the preserving and then dehydrating tab, and we would love for you to visit. And then also, if you have joined us in the middle of this show, I want to introduce myself one more time. I'm Jennifer Osich, and I am one of the lead teachers at selfreliantschool.com. And so I would love to give you the free dehydrating cheat sheet. It's on dehydrating storage. So if you go again, selfreliantschool.com/dry storage. I don't want to get that wrong. I'm looking over there on the slide. Okay, so like I said, please come by so I can give that to you. It is my gift to you, and I am so excited to be releasing it. So with that being said, remember, being self-reliant isn't about you. It isn't about being selfish. It isn't about any of those things. It is about taking care of yourself so you can be able to take care of the ones that you love. Until we talk again, take care until we talk again. I'm so glad you could join me today. Here's what to do next. Head over to selfreliantlife.tv to pick up the show notes for this episode and to watch replays of older episodes. To go directly to the show notes for this episode, go to selfreliantlife.tv, and then without a space, type / and then the number of today's episode. You can watch this show live every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, live on Facebook or the Periscope app. Don't forget to stop by selfreliantschool.com/free to get your free Self-Reliant School videos that will help you get started living a self-reliant life. Also, if you're listening to this show as a podcast and you've liked what you've heard today, please subscribe through Stitcher, iTunes, or your favorite podcast app. If you're on a mobile device, just search for the Self-Reliant Living Show. If you're on a laptop or desktop, just go to selfreliantlife.tv/iTunes. And while you're there, please leave a review. I love to hear from you. You leaving feedback makes it easier for others that are interested in living a self-reliant life to find my podcast. Take care until we talk again.